Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling for you and for me. See on the portals he's waiting and watching for you and for me. Why should we tarry when Jesus is pleading for you and for me? Why should we linger and heed not his mercies for you and for me? Come home, ye who are weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, oh sinner, come home.
In the book of Hosea, it talks about a man who God calls to marry a prostitute. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense why God will call a man just to do something like that, because prostitutes were not people who were looked highly upon. And what's crazy as well is that it's in reflection of what's happening during that time. During that time in the southern kingdom, Judah had many kings, and these kings ranged from good and bad. Some kings put places where they encourage people to worship other gods, and there are kings that come in and tear these places down. So it's this constant battle, this like roller coaster of a relationship with God's people. See, that is in connection to this whole story of Hosea. God calls Hosea to marry a woman who is essentially a big sinner. And after having kids with her, she goes back to her old ways. And God calls Hosea again to redeem her. So it's this constant battle of the people of Israel, God's people, following after bad kings, following good kings, and this relationship of sinful desires and going back to the old ways and being redeemed. And I think ultimately this story of Hosea in the book of Hosea, it foreshadows the beautiful redemption that we have in Jesus Christ. And I hope that when you think about this story of it doesn't make sense why God would do such a thing, that you be encouraged that God has a plan and that he will institute someone to come along and redeem you from your old ways. That even if, just like this prostitute, going back to her old ways, that you're reminded that God's grace still covers you, that God still wants you, even though it doesn't make sense.
Oh, for the wonderful love he has promised for you and for me. Though we have sinned, he has mercy and pardon for you and for me. Come home, come home, come home, come home, come home, come home. Jesus, weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling, oh sinner, come home. Calling, oh sinner, come home.